with a build guide, and this is going to be for the Freezing Pulse / Ice Spear Totem Heirophant. Do this build every league, so you guys have probably been waiting for this one. Some major changes this league, I would say. Part of it is the cluster jewels, and another part of it is the just kind of like the league mechanic and how that made me react and change the build. So I'll be going over a bunch of things. There were some things that were kind of like more optional, I'd say, before, that are now, I would say, are a bit more mandatory. Obviously, the mechanic of the league got nerfed a couple times, I think, already. In multiple ways, some in visibility ways, some just in like raw damage. I will say that prior even to the nerfs, the only thing that was really killing me would be the volatiles. And it was because I still like couldn't really see them, right? Like this is before anything got changed. Even in tier 16 maps, this build was actually incredibly safe in the deliriums, and it was really just a matter of like, you know, not being able to see those volatiles sometimes, especially if it was a map like super close quarters, like Toxic Sewer. I didn't even bother to run that map, actually, because it like the problem is with how the walls show the terrain sometime, right? Like because of your view on the terrain and how the walls are, it's like there's some areas in that map where you can't even actually see like the things spawn or like track them. If like, so if you do see them and they're moving towards you, and you know, you can lose track of them in the wall and stuff. So yeah, that map was really bad for it. But most other maps I didn't have any problems, especially outdoor maps. Yeah, so really safe after I made all the adjustments. When I first started playing the league, the build was kind of like dying left and right to these deliriums. And some of that was just learning how to do the delirium better, but I would say a lot of it was just things stunning you or just being like generally really overpowered and stuff like that. So once I made certain changes to the build, it allowed things to get a lot tankier, and I'll go through those. But first, this is the basic outline of the build. We'll start with the Ascendancy, I guess. This is pretty common Ritual of Awakening, right? And then you're pretty much always going to get Divine Guidance. The main thing here is going to be, do you want Conviction of Power or do you want Sanctuary of Thought? Now, for me, Sanctuary of Thought is really only going to get used if you have like an AoE skill or something like that, or like because this is actually insane, getting the Endurance Charge generation, and getting the, I just pick up an extra charge with it usually, and it's pretty nutty. Essentially gives you extra max res, gives you the damage reduction from the fizz damage, and gives you the elemental damage reduction as well. And then it gives you power charges, which are a nice little damage on top, so definitely a good node. And unless you're doing something that's very AoE centric, I wouldn't really bother with Sanctuary of Thought, especially after the ES nerf. So, to the node, I mean. General tree. So right now I'm only using one cluster jewel, and that is a projectile one, and it has Streamlined and Shrieking Bolts. Now, the reason why I do this is because from everything that I can tell, this does work on totems, because I run a lot of the map with the talisman guy. I'm trying to, like, the werewolf guy who turns into a wolf. Now, before my damage got good enough to basically just obliterate him, he would be on my totems forever. Like, when he swapped to wolf form. He would just, and I mean, even in, like, caster form, he would target them with, like, the thing he shoots out or whatever, and, like, the ranged attacks he does, but, like, that's how I really knew, because when he would transfer to wolf, like, before, it was, like, you'd actually kind of have to be careful on that fight, because if that wolf hits you, it does massive damage, does a huge bleed, so you have to be, like, I mean, yeah, it's kind of easy to avoid, right, because it's the only thing really going on, although they did add some newer stuff to avoid in, like, later patches, I think, more recent patches, but, there's not a lot going on, so it's kind of easy to avoid, but he was just glued onto the totem this time. And it's like that with pretty much every other boss I see. The Conquerors, everything like that. So, pretty sure the taunt does work, and it's super OP and useful. Projectile speed, obviously, just Freezing Pulse has insane projectile speed. It's amazing. So there's that. And then I took this and just put a normal jewel socket at the end. Because when you have more life to get, basically, it's not, I don't think, worth to put one of those life ones in. If you don't have more life to get and you're just trying to extend, like, whatever, you've taken all the life you can reasonably get, and it's going to be a lot of points to get to new clusters, that's where that life jewel works a lot better. Or in something like a Voices or something like that, obviously. So, yeah. And, like, this build, too, could benefit from, like, a Voices in a sense. If you want to do a couple things, I would say there's a couple notable totem nodes, in addition to this one, which isn't really a totem node. Obviously, it's the projectile node, but there's Ancestral Reach, which actually increases the range at which you can place totems. And what I did is I went into my hideout here, right, and I stood in the same spot, and I was casting totems. I forget exactly where it is. I have screenshots that I can upload in the description if people don't believe me, but basically, like, I was spamming totems at, like, the max distance I possibly could, like this, and I would wait till I got one that looked, like, pretty far, right, like something like that, and then I would recast with Ancestral Reach in from the same spot, and it instantly, like, went past. It probably went to, like, here or something like that, so it's not, like, insane, I guess, but it's, like, definitely noticeable. It's, like, and you can kind of notice it when you're playing too, to be honest. It's much easier to, like, off-screen things, but ultimately I just thought that it wasn't really necessary for the most part, especially now with the totems having taunt. I think there might be a couple situations with, like, really sketchy metamorphs in particular and things like that where you would kind of want that, but I don't think it's something that's, like, super necessary. So if you're running, like, a Voices, right, and you have kind of, like, free slots, that is definitely one to consider, because it also gives you totem damage and totem placement speed, or totem duration, I think, and totem damage. And then there's another one that gives, like, placement speed and cast speed. I forget what that one's called, but so there's a lot of decent, like, damage ones that you could just, like, you could get one that has the Ancestral Reach plus a damage thing and just throw it into a Voices and have this, that, and something else in there. So that would be all fine, but if you're not going to use a Voices, the goal of this build wasn't really to make something, like, super expensive, right? Especially because it's kind of like a starter. So I didn't want to just have a Voices in here with, like, fucking gems popping out the yin-yang or whatever. So there's definitely, like, good uses, though, for some of those gems. And there's another one where your totems cannot be slowed below base action speed, which I think is, like, freeze. I think it's, like, the same thing on the Combs routes, basically. So that one could situationally be quite good as well. The thing is, I noticed that my totems seem to do pretty damn well for the most part, especially after the buffs to totem life. You can really feel that. The build's got a definite buff in terms of that. It's way tankier. The totems are way tankier against endgame content now. Like, they're not, like, they're going to sit there and tank, like, Hydra forever or something, but I think it's actually in a pretty good place. The more I play and the more I do, like, high level bossing, I might have to, like, pay closer attention. But I think part of the reason why I haven't been paying super close attention is because my totems just seem to be up a lot more, So it hasn't really been a problem to pay attention to, really. It's just been a pretty good situation. I don't think that they should be, like, able to, like, infinitely tank something or anything like that. But the situation they're in right now is basically, like, they're at least getting damage out before they die, which I think is, like, the problem that people had before. Especially on fights like Minotaur, where it's like he unburrows and reburrows, like, he burrows and unburrows, then kills all your totems. And he's untargetable during the time he's burrowing. So, cool fight, right? But, yeah, all that stuff is just a lot better now, I would say. So, yeah, look out for this projectile thing, and then I would also look out for the, obviously it's only going to work for projectile-based totem skills, right? So keep that in mind, but, yeah, so that, and, the Ancestral Reach. And then if you're having trouble with your totems being frozen or something like that, check out the one that makes it so they can't be reduced below action speed. So that's what I'll say about the cluster jewels. In terms of where to place them, like, it's pretty much going to be here or here, right? If you want more damage, you go here. If you want more mana, you go here. I mean, it's a small amount of damage, so I just always take the mana. A little extra mana is always helpful with this build, especially with Arcane Cloak, which is something I want to be talking about, so I would always get the mana. Now, something else you're going to notice is, I've done this before, so you may be used to this, but in certain iterations of the build, I haven't taken Precision, I haven't taken Nimbleness, I haven't taken Fangs of the Viper, like maybe I haven't invested in these as much, and I've more come down through this, and then taken the Jewel Socket right away. Now, the reason why I've invested into these is because the major change I made to this build is running Comb's Roots. Now, this kind of seems crazy, maybe, but if you look, we're not actually that slow. This is like with Comb's Roots on, right? Just walking around the hideout, and that's with no Onslaught, no Flask, no, you know what I mean, no Smoke Mine. See, this is when you have all. So you can still get pretty fucking fast, and like pretty much as fast as you need to get with just using your Flask properly, your Onslaught, your Quicksilver, using Smoke Mine, combining that with using Dash, etc., right? Instant Dash, super good this league, and you get 2 charges thanks to Second Wind. So yeah, using Comb's Roots is a lot more viable of an option, I think, on a lot of builds. Like, and it still does have a downside because you are in some sense slower, right? Like you're definitely not as fast as you would be with a pair of 25, 30, 35% movement speed boots. But, I mean, it's not like you feel so bad from using them. And they give you stun immunity. That's why we're using them. These also have movement speed corrupted on them. You don't need that at all. It definitely helps. Right now I'm giving up Lab Enchant on them to have the movement speed on them. But you can, like, if you really wanted more damage, you could just get the Lab Enchant. It's not going to break you and not have the 9% MS. Ideally, you would get both, but that's going to take a little bit, so it's kind of where that's at right now. But yeah, the stun immunity I noticed was just so necessary in this league, because what would happen is there's so many things that can just kind of like off-screen tag you, and they don't necessarily one-shot you, which is good, right? But they hit you hard enough to stun you significantly, and then there's like so many things that can happen in that window, because there's so many on death effects and stuff like that. So I was getting like mini stunned, even if I wasn't getting chain stunned, right? So that's the what you would normally be is like, oh, just use Soul of the Brine King or whatever. But there's a couple problems with Soul of the Brine King. It's like, first of all, you don't really want this to be your like primary pantheon. I don't think, like, this is a much better one. Soul of Lunaris, especially for totems, lets you just shit on chain maps. Now you could always turn this on only for chain maps and just play a bit more conservatively, trying to get stunned, but ideally this does other good things for you too, with the projectile avoidance, the physical damage reduction, and the dodge. So this is just good to have on all around, I feel like, and this is something I use while leveling, but I don't really like to like super rely on it, right? And it's more for like, it works a lot better in leveling, because in leveling you're going to be more likely to be hit by something. It's like, oh, that was a stray hit, you know what I mean? And like, you're not going to get followed up on immediately, right, into a death. Like, you'll get hit, and you can't be stunned again after that, but it's not like during the initial stun you're going to get piled on. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like the problem I was running into this league. It was like that initial stun was a problem. You know, not even thinking about subsequent stuns. It was like right out of the gate I was getting stunned just a huge amount of time and getting kind of exploded by the ground effects. So that's why I use Comb's Roots, and it's a nice bit of life. And it's also just like having true stun immunity is really good just in general. Like, it's always been good. I think back when this game was a lot slower, like around like Nemesis League, stuff like that, like way back then, stun immunity was almost considered, I feel like, on like necessary on a lot of hardcore builds. And And just because of how the game has kind of changed and some of the EHP values you can get, and just people understanding the game more, what to do, what not to do, what maps to run, what maps to avoid, using things like supports to buff your damage to crazy amounts and your defenses and stuff like that. Stun immunity's fallen by the wayside quite a bit, and is really more just considered for certain builds and stuff like that. I didn't run it a lot before on this build. Even when I was doing totems on hardcore, I never really invested into it back then because it was just too hard to get to, right? And stuff like that. But I think in this league, it is really good to have stun immunity. I haven't really played the build without stun immunity in the new, like the post-nerf version of the league, but I would still run stun immunity. I just like it in general. I think I'm going to run it no matter what the league is next time, Combs Roots. I just really like it. And you can get enough speed to make it work, so that's why I basically got these. You can get stun immunity in other ways. So you can use the Chiula amulet, but I feel like that's a really big sacrifice. You can use... Like, not only is it sacrificing your next slot, but there's two... No matter which one you use, there's kind of a big sacrifice on your character, too, right? Because it's 20% reduced health, or converting health to ES, which you don't really want to do. Like, it's not like ES is useless for us, but it's nowhere near as good as health. So yeah, I would say you don't really want to do that. And I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, the other way would be avoid stun. Now you have a 50% chance to like not get stunned when you have ES, but that doesn't stack with like the normal avoidance on the tree. I don't believe, if you go to the wiki, I believe it says that. So you're basically starting from 0 there, and how that works is like, I think the ES one will roll first, and then if the stun gets through that, then whatever percentage you have to avoid will roll next. So it's kind of nice to have like a multi-layer there, but you would still need to get your chance to avoid stun to be pretty high. I actually had some pretty damn good boots that had like 29% on them with like life, double res, stuff like that, and I was in the process of trying to make like a avoid stun set, and the thing is, it's like I would be able to get it probably to like 90%, right? But it's just annoying because, and I could get it to 100% if I did specific things, right? Like if I use like really high tier essences, for example, but crafting that gear then just gets like so expensive and tedious, like buying all the stuff, and it's hard to get really the rolls you want and stuff like that. It is made way easier by a fact that you use the double Kikazarus, and you anoint Sanctum of Thought here. And I'll talk about that later in the video, because it basically makes the requirements on your other pieces of gear not nearly as bad. But it's just a lot to invest, and I think it's easier to run the Combs Roots. Optimally, you would probably want... I guess maybe to try and compile that stun immunity set, but it's not easy because you really need the higher tier essences. I think the only stun immunity or stun avoidance that drops is like it's on one of the Conqueror mods for boots or something like that, and then it's on Elder. So you have to get like a good one of those, which is actually probably the easier part, to be realistic. And then you have to roll shit yourself, because the other thing you have to keep in mind is that on the boots, Conqueror boots are dropping all the time, Elder boots are dropping all the time, right? So there's a lot of those in circulation. Nobody is crafting this shit on their gear pretty much, and if they are, it's going to be for self-use, and they're only going to like get rid of it if they upgrade that particular piece, and they're probably not going to be upgrading that particular piece because they need to upgrade with something to stun resist in order to keep that same effect, right? So there's just not a lot of that gear out there, which means you pretty much have to craft it. And it's a pain in the ass because you have to get the essences. The essences are super expensive. You're talking like 6-7 chaos, I think, for the highest tier of that specific essence. I think it might be Scorn or something. And yeah, it's just really annoying. I will say that luckily, if you did want to go that route, it's much easier to craft a head or a boot or gloves than boots. So definitely buy the boots and try and craft it on the other two. The only source of it from the tree is here, I believe, and like these two mini nodes. And coming down here is just not going to be a thing. I mean, I guess you could like you could anoint Heart of Oak, is what you could do, and that's actually definitely like a realistic thing because you could still get to this relatively easily. Sanctum of Thought. And it looks like it's really bad, but these two are actually 8% increased max mana. So it's not like completely worthless to do that. But you are cutting into other things at that point, right? So, you know, you're going to have to make sacrifices somewhere. If I were to look at this tree and I would think, like, where am I going to sacrifice? It would probably be just life. Would probably be... Might just remove this cluster, honestly. Just do 1, 2, 3. And then grab it. I have to take out one more. So you lose like a considerable bit of life. You gain a bit of mana, for sure, but that would be another way you could do it, is you could anoint that. Well, you would be gaining the life from Heart of Oak. Right, so it's actually not anywhere near as bad as that, to be fair. So that wouldn't be like a terrible anoint, I guess. But that's another option you can do. Because it's definitely possible to reach this from there.
Yo, dude.
Yo, one sec. Yo, making a video, just give me one sec. The next thing to talk about, since my friend Onyx, forget I was in Discord. So we talked about the Ascendancy, we talked about the Cluster Jewels, we talked about getting the movement speed for the Combs Roots. A couple other things to mention about this. So, Legion Jewel, I'm contemplating using a Legion Jewel. I think it's going to be the one that we've used in the past, which gives us the energy shield. 50% of your, or 20% of your life is energy shield. That's the Doriani's one for, I forget which one it is, to be honest. Like the actual, it's the Vol one, but I don't know what they're called. But yeah, that one's probably the best, I would say. If you want the, there's like one that's like 4% more damage for power charge, I think. It's not really that good. I would say the Doriani's one gives you way more effective health. But, you know, to each their own. You could basically choose any one. And a good slot for that might be here, basically. Potentially here. Depends on what it's going to change some of this too. And the main thing you're going to have to worry about is nimbleness getting taken away. But at the end of the day, it's only a 4% movement speed, and you could reallocate the points to damage somewhere else. And these health nodes are going to get taken away. It really just depends on like how bad the outcome is going to be, right? On like the surrounding nodes. Because if you get actual decent RNG in some of these nodes and stuff like that, and maybe it changes Arcane Vision to something, you know, you can actually end up with like a better situation stat-wise, and while getting the keystone, but it could also make it worse just to get the keystone. So it's something you have to play around with for sure. And those jewels aren't super easy to play around with. They've probably gone down in price a lot now, but they were pretty expensive earlier on. So let's go to the gear. So 6-link Soul Mantle, nothing new. Hypo, Cold Pen, GMP, Control Destruction, Faster Casting, Ice Spear. Now you're going to swap added Cold in for GMP for Freezing Pulse, obviously. And you're going to swap Freezing Pulse in for Ice Spear, but the Ice Spear setup is just Ice Spear here in GMP. Now, if you notice in here, we have a Rain of Splinters. That's because we're using the Ice Spear. I think I just killed Sirius on this guy. This is the last time I logged in, so I still have this in. For Sirius, by the way, you want the Corrupting Blood probably on a jewel. You ideally want it probably on your Rain of Splinters because if you put on Uranus Splinters, then when you fight Sirius, you can actually remove this jewel, since you're not going to be using Freezing Pulse or you fight any big boss. And you can put, like, an actual, like, just fucking Omega damage jewel in here, right? And rock the shit out of him. Right now, this is kind of like a useless jewel in a fight like Sirius, but you need it for the Corrupting Blood, because I didn't really think a ton ahead. Problem is, probably a lot easier to get the Corrupting Blood on the first snow. You might have to corrupt these yourself, but they are pretty cheap, because they don't get used a lot anymore. But they're super good for this build. They add, like, a ton of damage, obviously. So, yeah. That's, like, the Ice Spear swap. I also have a thing, like, when I do Sirius, I swap to, like, a +1 helm. But I don't do that for, like, other bosses, usually. And I usually don't even swap for, like, map bosses or anything. I just kill them with Freezing Pulse, because it still does good damage. But on something like a Conqueror or a Guardian, I'll swap, and depending on, like, if it's something within the map itself, I usually won't use the helm. But if it's something like I'm going into, like, a thing that's only that, like Uber Elder or Sirius or Elder or something like that, then I'll just do the helm swap, right? Because it takes an extra second. I think the most efficient way to do the helm slot is just to, like, get all these again. And that way I don't have to restock the gems, right? So I just take the helm and put it in place, and it's, like, the same exact setup you have in here. And if you don't have any auras or something in the helm, it works perfect. Because then they don't get unallocated. Speaking of auras, we do have auras. We have Clarity and Precision. So Precision just adds a little bit of extra damage. Obviously, I just use level 1. Clarity is just nice for the mana regen, especially because of using Arcane Cloak and stuff like that. I only run it to the point where, like, it doesn't start affecting my MOM pool, which is pretty much around where it is right now, right? So that's that. Dash is the movement skill. We have, obviously, Righteous Fire for a bit of added damage. Elemental Weakness, this should probably be Projectile Weakness, but I just haven't swapped it yet. And it still does a lot. Frost Bomb, definitely want this. Super good. And Arcane Cloak. So this skill is honestly amazing. And what I do is I tend to just pop it, like, preemptively and let it soak damage, because this game is just such bullshit with, like, you know, I don't know, they've made the game bullshit over the years, right? It's like, there's just too much shit everywhere. You can't see what's hitting you ever, especially in the fucking mist. They did fix it a little, but it's still, like, a clusterfuck completely. So you just want to have it up, in my opinion. Like, you're probably going to have a bad time if you're trying to use it, like, reactively. And obviously, like, you have to be careful when you're using it reactively to some extent, because you are eating into your MOM mana, right? Now, the idea is that, like, if you pop it, stays active for 6 or 7 seconds, your mana is going to come back relatively quickly, so you end up having a lot of effective health. But if you just pop it and then immediately take the hit, your mana is going to be at, like, dog shit, right? So you have a huge shield, but you also have, like, not a lot of your mana, so it's not anywhere near as effective. So I just kind of keep it popped preemptively, and what I'll do is I'll just play more aggressively when it's up, and when it's down, I'll just play a little bit more like a bitch. But it's up a lot of the time, and only has like a 3.1 second cooldown time, right? So it's not really that big a deal. Obviously, it's a bit problematic if, like, it gets chunked down to hardly anything, but it's still on you, because it has to actually come off you first before the cooldown time resets. Something to keep in mind there. And go over, I think that's it. Smoke Mine is good just for extra movement speed. The gear itself, okay. Oh yeah, and yeah, so the 100% curse reduction. I didn't realize whenever they changed this, but they changed this at some point, and it's super fucking good. 20% reduce extra damage taken from critical strikes, and 20% reduced effective curses on you. Now, I'm pretty sure how the critical strikes thing is, it doesn't actually work like that sounds like, because it only takes it from the critical portion of the strike, so it's not like 20%. Oh, reduce extra damage, yeah, okay, so it does word it like that, yeah. So it's only from, like, the extra part of the damage. It's not like the whole hit, but it's still good. And you're not even getting it for that anyway. You're getting it for the other part. So with that, you have 100% curse immunity. 100% curse immunity is just insane, because now your resistances, if you want to rely on endurance charge, you can actually have 59 all-res across the board, get 16 all-res from endurance charges, and be capped all the time. I mean, at your base, like, cap res, which is 75, right? Because nothing can move your res. Like if you watch, put on defense. So you're gonna see them go up because of the endurance charges, but then they never go down. As long as the endurance charges stay up, no matter what curse combination goes, they don't change at all. And that's how you know it's working. And the hidden part about this is that it's affecting, now temp chains doesn't affect you at all. Those curses don't affect you at all. People think that the Kikazarus are the antidote to the Soul Mantle, but in reality, you're still getting, before you're getting 20% effect of like a level 20 projectile weakness on you, 20% effect of a level 20 vuln, and now you're just not getting that at all. So that's fucking huge. It's like super good, right? Some people will probably use their Redeemer rings or something like that, or the Conqueror rings with the 35% and life and a bunch of other shit. The problem with that is just like you don't really need res. So getting a ring with like tricked out res is not good. The life is good, but it's like it's not gonna make up for the extra damage you're taking just from taking more damage. The percentage-based damage on these huge attacks is huge, right? And on top of that, you're not getting unless you had like a ring that was like super tricked out damage-wise, I would never replace a Kikazaru, I don't think. Yeah, so, I mean, maybe replacing one wouldn't actually be the end of the world, depending on what your build needed, like if you really wanted something from a ring in particular, but replacing two, no, fuck that. Unless you had like god tier rings, I would say. So there's that. Actually thinking about it, you could maybe get a Kika with like Elder, and then put a Mark of Shaper in here. Oh no, you couldn't, because then you wouldn't have the curse effectiveness. Yeah, so it's just going to be hard to really find something that'd be like super worth doing that, I think. But that is an option if you want to look into it. But yeah, with 100% curse immunity, it's just fucking amazing. And then this is my gear. Basically, just get projectile speed on your gloves. Want the projectile speed enchant on your helm. Helm doesn't need to be that tricked out. Unique. This you want to use a unique. You want to quality it with the elemental damage one. And basically, if you can't get this, because it is kind of expensive, you want to do something with like mana, life, and then if you need res or if you need damage, just crit multi and cast speed. Other damage stats you want. I didn't have this for a while. Belt, I like to just use a Stygian. If you had like a top tier Abyss Jewel, I like to use a Crystal Belt. If you had a top tier Abyss Jewel, it'd probably be worth using a Stygian, but for all like normal purposes, I would just use this. And then just wands are pretty easy. I like getting the chaos damage cast speed prefix from the temple, like searching wands for that, because cast speed's amazing, and any type of flat damage with freezing pulse, it's a 150% damage effectiveness. It's nutty. I always try and make sure I get projectile speed. This build has a lot of projectile speed. It's like 30, 30, 30, 30 basically. Then the stuff on the gem, then stuff on the tree, right? Has a lot of projectile speed. And if you really wanted more, you could swap in like faster proj, but I don't think it's necessary. And that's pretty much it. I think that's kind of like the whole build. And yeah, I'm going to have links to encounters with it. And if you have any questions or anything like that, just feel free to message me. I'm going with the 2 wands just because, like, I feel like it's not worth getting the extra totem in a lot of cases to drop the damage. Like you can just get more. You can actually get more damage doing 2 wands unless you get a really decent shield. So I feel like that's the better play most of the time. But if you really wanted to use like shield charge or something, you could use a shield for sure. And just try and get one with 1 extra totem. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you for watching, and talk to you guys later.